Thank you so much for coming to the talk. I'm excited to meet some of you guys and ask some questions. So how many people here are what you would consider a developer? I am a developer, that is me. How many people in here would say that they're a friend to someone? You're like a good friend, yes? We have any good friends? Oh, excellent, okay. Please be my friend today. I am really excited to share with you some interesting things, but mainly we're here to talk about pushing the limits of WordPress, okay? I think that's what we want to do, all of us. We want to see what we can do with WordPress. How can we make it our own? How can we make it not that default cookie cutter site? How can it empower us? And one of the ways that we do this is through speeding up our development processes. That's why we use WordPress. It makes things easier. It allows us to publish our ideas or someone else's ideas if we have clients. And so that's very important. But speed is also another thing that we want out of WordPress that we don't always get. And that comes in terms of the performance of the site, like how fast it runs, and then also how quickly we can get from A to Z with whatever it is our idea is. Right? So I'm curious, how many of you have created an idea of your own idea in WordPress? Blog, application. Eric, you raised your hand. What is an idea?
An idea that I created, backslid.com, which is a place where golf professionals gather and put all their answers to a bunch of questions that we ask.
So a Q&A site, not just a blog, a Q&A site for golf professionals to talk to each other. Okay, that's pretty neat. Anybody else have ideas? Anybody else? Yes, Jim, correct?
Yeah, I created a site for the Clemson, South Carolina football rivalry. So it's got scores and related data.
Okay, scores and related data for a Clemson, Carolina rivalry site. Very cool. Well, in each one of, yes?
Oh,
No, go ahead.
I created a site where I listed promo codes out of podcasts because I couldn't find them when I was looking for them.
Okay.
So I listed by podcast, by offer, and by sponsor.
So collecting and organizing the world's information for podcast discount codes. Google of podcasts. I like it. Very cool. Very cool. So in all of these instances, performance and speed are key, right? They're like what allow us to keep going on our idea. We don't want to give up because it's too hard. So how many of you here would consider yourself a pro? I am a pro. What does pro mean to you? You, sir, what's your name?
Make a living doing development.
Yeah? Making a living? Name?
Mark.
Mark. So Mark says being a pro means making a living, providing for your family. Somebody else. What does pro mean? If you give me your name, that'd be great. Anybody? Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Aaron?
Aaron?
I like creating things that people can use in every day.
So creating things that people use every day. That's like professional grade. I think pro can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. But that's ultimately what we're trying to do with TYPEROCKET, is to create some sort of tool that allows you to do things at a professional level. Or if you're not a pro yet, like how you might want to get there, right? So if you're a freelancer and you're beginning, or a junior dev or something like that, you're like, I have these ideas, I'm not able to get there yet, but I want to. And where do I start? So that's an important part of the conversation. In terms of performance, I think this is our enemy, right? Things running slow. And it can cause all kinds of problems. Slowness costs us time, it costs us resources, the results that we're aiming for. It holds us back from our desires to spend time with family. Clients' expectations aren't necessarily met. There's a lot of things that, when things are slow, not just from our tooling, it costs a lot. And there are a lot of causes for that, right? So, aside from what's up here, anybody else have causes? Anybody experience slowness hurting them and the causes of that? Anybody got ideas? Nobody wants to share? All of your sites run so fast. Yes?
It can kind of compound because you'll try to do something and it's slow, and So
Right. So the compounding of these things, the complexity compounds over time, and then each little thing that you want to do just gets harder and harder. I think the waiting for someone else is a big one. So if you use other people's plugins, I really wish their plugin had that feature. I guess I got to wait 6 months after putting in that request if they ever get back to me. And so now I can't build what I want to build. So now my slowness factor has happened, not just in terms of application performance. So ultimately, we want things to be fast. We want them to be extremely fast if we're pros, because time is money, not just for us, but also for our customers, right? Our clients. They want the site to be fast, because if their site loads faster, for example, then the conversions can start to happen. I can't tell you how many sites I've looked at, and I'm sure you have, where you just see the spinning wheel waiting for that site to load, and you just think, okay, there goes those sales for that customer or for myself. So as pros, we need it to be very fast. And that's where modern tools come into play. This is why this is important, because tools not only give us site performance, they also give us process performance for ourselves. So when we're building our things, we can get them done and be more profitable. So you can turn what was supposed to be 15 hours of work into 5 and still make the same outcome. And now both you and your client are more profitable for that. So that's extremely important. So when you have this speed and this extreme performance, you get other side effects. You get confidence, you get site performance, and the time to completion, again, is very strong. So we want all of these things. We don't want to feel like we don't have what it takes. But can WordPress be all of that to us? Is WordPress by itself slow? Does it get in the way of getting things done? Why do we use all these plugins in the first place? Because they help us get things done. But can WordPress be that? Now, I ask that question because there are other tools out there today that are very modern, very fast. They come out of the box with everything that you want potentially. You know, Statamic comes with caching and all this kind of other stuff. Should we be using a different tool other than WordPress? Can WordPress do the advanced model view controller type setups and systems for us? Like, as professionals, we look at these things because the speed of the site and the speed of us getting things done are very important. Prismic maybe for a headless CMS. So you land a project and you're supposed to build this flight system. And you ask yourself, you know, it has some requirements, the client says. You need to build flights where people can check out and get a plane seat. So you have customers and you have seats. The customers need seats to get on the plane. And then they throw another curveball in there. It's like, oh, but we need a JSON API because this has to integrate with this other team over here that we need you for this project, but our other team needs to integrate with what you're doing. Okay, say, no problem. I got a plugin for that. This is WordPress world, everybody, yeah. Then they tell you the other requirements. It has to be really fast, and it has to be very powerful. Okay. Well, the client says, and let me read my notes awkwardly as I walk across the stage. I don't want to wait for that plugin author to make that update, you know, when I'm ready to upgrade this. This is very important to our business. So, okay, that might take plugins off the table a little bit. And you say, well, there are plugins for this, but performance is important to me. So now I've added complexity, and I'm going to have to make updates and maintain this thing, and it's, okay, nobody's really winning right now, potentially, based on this client's requirements. And you could use several plugins, you know, hey, the one plugin doesn't do it, sure, the client's right, but I'll just add X, Y, and Z. Okay, still a problem. And that's where TYPEROCKET comes into play. As a developer, it gives you the tools that you need to really build out whatever you'd like. So, what are some modern features that we're going to need to build out a very custom system quickly that WordPress really doesn't come with out of the box? Okay? You're going to need some database stuff. You're going to need some design patterns like model view controller. And again, this is about process and speed. This isn't just performance on the site side. You're going to want custom fields, obviously. You got to have some sort of input between the user and the application. You know, you want security to be a big part of it. This is for flights. You don't want some interesting things to happen there. And dev tools, that's another part of a developer experience. Is I need to know when things are going wrong. I need to know how I'm performing. So all of these things need to be in place. And TypeRocket really provides that when we have this kind of requirement. So here's some more gotchas that the client's throwing at us. The flights can't be a post type. So we can't use post types for flights. Okay, well, that's a little cringeworthy. And the reason for that is they say, we already have a flights database. We need this to be moved over. And so we don't want to restructure our whole database. We need you to use our database setup. And we have seats, and those will have mini flights. So we have a relationship there. And we need that JSON API, of course, but that needs to be public. This other stuff needs to be private. And then the admin needs to be restricted. We don't want just any user on our WordPress site. Okay, these are a lot of requirements. We're already like, oh my gosh, overwhelmed. And this is only 4 things. Okay? So can we do this? Let's see if I can get that to play. Okay, so here's what we're going to build. Flight system, seats, customers, notes, a little bit of metadata information. So you can add meta keys. Custom fields are at work here. We can clone some things, obviously update our stuff. And then we can view stuff. Here's just kind of a dump of the data from the database. We're going to build all this without post types. That whole interface, tables, searchable, all that kind of stuff. Here's seats, but we also have custom columns. There's no title field, and we're also saving a title to the database. So we're doing all this with a post type. And we'll see we still have a title set in the admin here. So that's interesting. Okay. So this is what we're going to build. Oh, whoops. Let me wonder if I can fast forward. Well, it was going to show a JSON API, but that's okay. We all know what that looks like. So MVC backends is where we're going to start because we need this custom database stuff. Who's familiar with MVC, that term? Model View Controller. So models. Models are code that represents what's in your database. Does that make sense? Well, it's like if my database has 2 columns, one called first name, one called last name, then whenever I pull that into my code, I need that to look a certain way. I want to interact with it interestingly. I just don't want to get an array of data that's first name, last name. That's not very helpful. So models layer on a lot of functionality, like I can work with that data and update or create or duplicate, that kind of stuff. V stands for view. So it's allowing us to separate the concerns, the business logic of our website and our application, and what gets displayed on the page. So we can keep that very clean, and it makes things very elegant. And then the C is the controller. It's who's in control of the business logic, who's in control of what happens on the site. So we'll be building that out. So the first part, developer tool, we need some sort of CLI to help us create these migrations so we can update and build our database rather rapidly. So TypeRocket comes with a Galaxy CLI where we can create a migration. That migration dumps out this little bit, and then you fill it up with some SQL, and then from there, that'll create our database and drop it right into the system. Pretty simple. And then we want to create a model for that migration. Does that make sense to everybody? So then from here, once we have a model, we can begin to do these types of things. So inside of our database, we can say, hey, flight, I want to find the flight of ID 1. So I'm just going to find the flight of ID 1 here. Whoops. So ID of 1, right over here. And what if I want it to be, I want to find the flight where the site has the ID of 1. So we can look up these different things. What if I want to get the customer of a specific flight? I can just jump right in here and grab the customer of the flight. So that's what a model can look like. It's a little bit less like the WP query, where you're just kind of querying something, and it feels more like you're interacting with that actual database object. So it's very clean and easy to read. And then here's what a controller would look like in the back end. So you have essentially the resource is the table that it's connected to without the WordPress prefix. And then the customer class here is sort of this relationship tie-in to where I can say, hey, there's this other model called user, and it's connected through the database using that customer ID. And then whenever I call this function on that relationship, it will give me that user. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's how we're able, to accomplish this customer bit at the very bottom. Flight, we do the customer, then we get that customer. So it makes accessing that quite easy. And then we have the user here. We'll get into this later. The user has these flights, so we want to be able to do the inverse of that. So there we would be able to do flight, get the customer, or user, get the flights. So we can access that information rather rapidly. So that is models. I guess I have to click for the play button. Okay, so this is what we're going to build. This is going to be the first part. This is the index page for our MVC application. We have a table and some other things. This is all we need to build that model piece. Is one line of code with TYPEROCKET, and that will set us up with the example. So you'll see the little plane icon off in the distance over here, right over here. So right there we have an admin page. It's not a post type, even though it looks like it. So we'll do this, and then we need to create this flight controller. And this is the controlling of the logic, and we just need to return a view. Say, I want the flights.index, and this would be in a folder. This is like a lookup call within that method. But what's important is now all of the logic for our table is what we need on the screen. There's no craziness here. It's just a simple, we create a table object, and we tell it what the kind of information we want to display, and it's great. And then because we wired up the customer using the model, we're able to do this bit here. See, we grab the customer, and then we get that user's display name, and that's what shows up in that table. So by using this like dot syntax, we can actually load different data into the column rows. So very easy in terms of lines of code, and we're already on our way. The next piece is we need to have this form to add and create, or add and create and edit and delete, or edit and update. So here's our views. We need a form. Okay, let's grab one, make that in the controller. We need something to call the button. So we'll give each one of those its own unique text, add or update. And then we're able to put in the model into each one of these sections. So for the add page, here we create a form and we tell it flight. And that essentially tells TYPEROCKET very easily, hey, go look up the flight model. And then we get that form. And then for update, we pass into the edit piece here our flight, and it will automatically look up the correct ID. So it just automatically looks up for the edit page whenever you go to it. It'll have an ID in the URL, and it'll say, oh, grab this one. So flight of ID 1, pull that in and put it into the form, and then we can update it. So that will automatically populate some of our stuff. So almost there. The last piece is the form. So we just create the form by taking the form, setting the save piece to the button here. So we put the save as the button variable that we passed into the view using that compact method from before. So go back here. We're taking these variables and we're passing them to the view by using this little compact function. That's a PHP thing. That's not a TYPEROCKET thing. You could pass an array and it would do the same thing. It just easily creates an array for us. So that's how we get here. We have select menu. We tie those menus into the model. So the seat model, which we'll look at in a little while, and this user model to get our customer. And then we tell it where in the database it should connect. So that customer ID. And then a repeater field down here, okay? That contains multiple fields. And it's those fields are set to a row. So very quickly we can build out this form. And so there's our repeater field. That's kind of what gets created there. And for that repeater field, we might want to format the data that gets saved into that. So when I submit my form to this controller, I want it to be JSON encoded. So I'm going to use this format thing on this flight model, and it's going to say that meta field, format that as JSON before you send it to the database, so it'll be saved as JSON. And then when I get that data back out of the database, this cast piece over here, this cast property, it's going to say, take that JSON encoded stuff and then convert it into an object for me, okay? Because my repeater field doesn't need text, it wants an object, an array of information. But we also have these little pencil marks, and this is interesting feature in TYPEROCKET. Whenever you set your fields to fillable, it opens those fields up, and it says these fields are safe to be saved. So for example, do we want the user to be able to create their own malicious line of code that says, hey, pass in the ID and then update the ID of this flight? Does that make sense? I want my flight IDs to be incrementing based on what the database says, not what the user says. So by doing this, we can lock down certain fields to where people can't just submit miscellaneous data. And then our update and delete methods on our controller. Pretty straightforward. We're going to create a new flight by using the new keyword on the flight and then get the fields from the request that the server sent, drop those into the flight and save it just like that. Bada boom, bada bing. And then in the update, we're doing similar as we did with the edit page. It automatically will look up the flight for us. It'll pass in the ID, query up the right one, and then we can just do the same thing, except we're redirecting to different pages. And so what that looks like is this. I believe this is a video. There we go. Oh, no, this is new. So we need deleting. We need deleting functionality. You're not authorized to delete this. Okay, so we want to be able to block some things, but then maybe you do have access and we want to be able to delete stuff. So how do we lock down specific controller features, right? Who has access to what? So here we'll create a destroy method. We don't need a view for this because this is just functionality in the background that happens over Ajax, right? So what we do is we grab that same flight. We're also going to grab the response. We're going to see if that flight can be deleted by the current logged in user. So we just do flight, arrow, can, and that's right here. Can you delete this? If not, then you're not authorized. If you can, then we will delete it. And then we return a response object here. And that response object is essentially returning JSON back to our Ajax API. Yes?
Did you write can, or is that part of TYPEROCKET?
That is part of TYPEROCKET. This piece here, this is...
So a lot of what we're seeing here isn't something that's in the MVC framework. It's already built into TYPEROCKET.
yes, so the MVC is part of TYPEROCKET. So they're one and the same. So what we call this can feature is policies. And this is important. It differs from WordPress roles and capabilities in a different way, and we'll look at that in a second. So the first thing we need to do, speed things up, process time, we'll make a policy. Here's our policy class. Well, there's a delete method on it. That's what we're looking up when we say can delete. We look this up. We say, hey, give me the authenticated user and this object being the flight in this case. But we don't really need much to do with that. We can just say, is the authorized user capable of managing flights? Now, why wouldn't I just use is capable, that WordPress has, that function, and why do I need to do policies for that? Well, if I start doing this is capable thing all over my code base, and then the client says, we have one other constraint that we need to add to this deletion process. Now you've got to go all over your whole code base and update every place where you might have used that. Or if you had used policies, it kind of organizes it. So again, process-wise, boom, you're done so fast with that request. So everybody's a little bit more profitable. But we still need this manage flights piece. Now TYPEROCKET makes it super easy to add extra capabilities to user roles in WordPress. So you don't really have to know all this kind of interesting shenanigans with WordPress. You can just jump in here, grab the roles, and update the administrator to have this new stuff. And then just like that, your admin user will have that capability, and they can begin to update, delete flights. And then as a part of this process, the last thing to do is to add that flight model into the policies kind of collection. So it says, hey, I want to register this policy with my application to make sure that it points to the right place. So I want my flights to use this flights policy. But maybe I wanted them to use the post policy. I would just exchange them. So, yes?
If you needed membership,
You absolutely could. You absolutely could.
Would you do the whole thing from scratch?
It depends. Like if you're building a membership site from scratch, you could actually use TYPEROCKET to do that quite easily. And then you could have multiple policies for different user level types. So I have my gold member policy, my basic member policy, all that kind of stuff. And then you can manage that differently. If you have a plugin, you might not want to have this code running on every page. So you obviously adding the role to your plugin activation, that type of thing. So this is what we've done. We've essentially created this policy that lets us elegantly create this type of policy. And we could do this for update, delete, create. We could create different policies for each one of those types of actions, whatever we wanted to do. And then if this fails, then we can tell the response this is unauthorized and to abort immediately. And what that will do is it will throw an error to the server. The server will respond to that. And it will throw a 401 error instead of just a 500 error or something like that. So the errors match with what the actual server or the client side would like to receive based on the truth of what you've done. So that's MVC. We made it. Everybody feel pretty good about that? Pretty easy? Yeah? Post types. To save time, let's do this a little bit faster. Post types. This seat section here. Let's build this. Okay? We need to be able to edit these seats, add new ones. You notice that this is a searchable field, that select box. And then when we update it, you'll see that the title there has been saved. So we don't have a title field, but how did this happen? That's using all of this. All of this code is everything you need to do what you just saw on the screen. That's it. You set the icon to tickets. You tell it not to use any features, which means no editor, no title tag. You say this is only for the admin. I don't want a front end for this. I don't want anybody looking at this. I add columns to the database table, so that's what the add column, row, and letter are. I set row to true, which means it can be sorted. So I can now sort that. Again, that's in that interface here where you see row up here and letter. And then our custom fields right inside of here. So we create a form, set the main form to this select and radio. There's one of them searchable, and we set our options to however we want it to be. And then when we save the title, we get this model thing again, and we can say, give me the seat meta, the row, and the seat meta and the letter. Combine those, and that will be what my title saves as. So just like that, instead of doing MVC, thankfully, we didn't have to go through that for this particular one. Not quite as powerful as MVC. We could have if we wanted way more power, but this is out of the box. Build it up real quick. Maybe 10 lines of code right here. And then all we need is that seat model. So we'll go create it and then connect that to the flights as well, just like we had done earlier. And then the flight, we want to connect that back to the seat. Now, JSON API. This is where the talk gets really long. Let me look at my watch. Oh, boy. Okay, who wants a JSON? How many of you need a headless CMS? Anybody? Headless? It's new, it's big, it's amazing. How do you create a headless CMS when you have custom tables and that doesn't come built into the WordPress REST API? How are we going to do this? How are we going to get Prismic or some other headless CMS to work with this? Or not Prismic, but Netlify, something like that. JSON API. Oh, okay, that's all we have to do. Thank goodness. We create a route. We say whenever we get a GET request on this URL, the star represents like a variable. So it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever you want it to be in there. It will send that. It will connect to the user. It says user of ID number 1. Does that make sense? User of ID number 1. Fetch that user. Get the user. Get their flights. Paginate. Return 3 lines of code. And I have a JSON API. And there we go. That's it. So just like that, we have a custom database table using MVC, using a really sweet post type, and a JSON API. And we could do way more with that if we wanted to. But essentially, again, this is what we get. Flights with update, delete, create capabilities, repeater fields with meta boxes, data getting transformed and formatted on retrieval and save straight into our database. We're able to actually use a database type of JSON instead of just the long text or something like that. So we get all the benefits of a modern MySQL setup. We didn't look at this page, but this is just a variable dump of the actual flight. And the seats, sorting, really fun. Really fun to build this, a lot of control. And that's how easy it is to do something fairly complex with TYPEROCKET. I say easy in terms of we didn't have to write a ton of code. We don't have to use, you may have noticed there are no WordPress hooks here. We didn't have to look up that one WordPress hook for that post type. It didn't need to be wrapped inside of add action init. TYPEROCKET actually knows all that and takes care of it. It knows where to hook up and say, oh, this is where you should save your metadata. We're not having to use different plugins to do different things here. It's all just taking care of us. So I ask you this question: what are you going to build that's fast? What are you going to build that saves you time and gets performance benefits? That when your client says to you, oh, I need feature X, you don't have to say, oh, well, I got to go look up another plugin. Or, well, we'll just have to wait for that one. Or, it's going to cost you way more than you probably have budget for. Now it just comes down to you as a professional, how much you want to put into being that pro, right? How far do you want to go? Now, you are the lid. You can be the one that limits you versus some other tool. All of that built right into TYPEROCKET. So thank you so much for being here to hear about TYPEROCKET. I know I went really fast because I figured you might have questions, and I figured you might want to see the real application in action and some of the other things that come with it. So with that being said, I believe we've got a little bit of time here. Let's see, escape out of this. So here's the site we just built. Any questions before I get into other stuff? Yes?
I'm interested in the database structure for that fence schema. What does that look like?
Yeah, sure. So I'll actually pull this right back up. And everybody stay calm, nothing's wrong. This is it. So we've got an unsigned variable. This stuff is pretty, if you have any kind of PHP MyAdmin, once you build it out in there, they give you this stuff. You can just copy and paste it right in. So this is, the only thing you really need to do is put this prefix piece in here. That way it works with whatever your site prefix is. But here we'll say, inside this meta section, we want to save it as JSON, which means in the ORM, I didn't show you, there's so many features that the ORM has, but you could do like a JSON specific query with like the fun arrow things, if you know what I'm talking about. It's pretty cool. You can dive right into that and query things up. Any other questions? Yes?
How many users are using TYPEROCKET?
Sites, well over 10,000. Well over 10,000. It depends on, so that's like people downloading it and using it in different ways. But I know people who use it and have used it on sites that are used by 100,000 people. So it's powering big and small sites. And it's been developing this for 10-something years. We just now decided, it'd be smart to make a professional version. So, any other questions? No? Okay. Well, if that's not the case, I want to show you some other stuff. So we talked about how performance and debugging tools, and we looked at the CLI and how that can help us build things out rather quickly. But maybe we want to know how many queries our pages are making. We want to make sure that our database is optimized. So TYPEROCKET out of the box comes with this like a SQL query monitor tool. And we can really see deeply into our queries. That's probably looking a little janky because the permalinks flush randomly. I believe, there we go. You can also like register post types. So if you want to quickly mock up an idea, you can go well beyond just registering a post type. You can limit revisions. You can add those database, those columns to the admin that we talked about and add sorting. All kinds of neat little things here. Let's see. I did want to show you some code that I think is interesting here. So I'm going to pull up our routes here. And so here is this route being forwarded to an actual controller. So we're not using an anonymous function, but it's our customers piece. So just a nice little quick one, syntax there. And let's see, what did I forward it to? Oh, it's the user, sorry, because we want to look at the user's flights. So here we get the user's flights. But we could also pull in those flights with the seat as well. And we could pull in the user with its posts. Yep. So here, let's get the browser to come up. There we go. And what this is doing, it's like pulling in extra data for our JSON API. Customer one, I think I actually did something wrong here. Okay, so we see here we pulled in the seat to come along with the flights, but I could actually go about it this way. I could say, give me the user's posts, give me the flights and the seats to those flights as it's connected to the flight, and then give me the meta for that user. And then I'm going to get the blog posts by that user. All these good blog posts. Auto drafts. I'm going to actually get rid of that piece because...
Could you zoom in there just a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Refresh this. So here's all the user's flights, user information, the meta for that user, the pagination bit of it, and the seat for that particular thing. So I just built out a very robust API just by telling it which relationships I wanted to pull in with that like with parameter. So again, if you're wanting to build, let's say, a Vue application, so you don't want to use WordPress templates, you want to use React for your front end, or you want to use Vue.js for your front end. You could use TYPEROCKET to build out these APIs very easily. You might not even want to use TYPEROCKET for your custom fields or for your post types. Maybe you just want it to help you easily build out these APIs. That's kind of the power of TYPEROCKET. It can say, hey, I can work with what you're already doing. I can pull in whatever it is that you need and just add that extra layer. And then as TYPEROCKET makes more sense for these different components that you do, it can work right as you need it. So, yes?
Can this be, creation of all this be wrapped into a plugin so it can be used on different sites somehow?
Right. So the way we like to tell people to use TYPEROCKET, it's like anything. You're going to run into naming collisions if you do that. Kind of like if you were to embed TYPEROCKET into your plugin and then put it on a marketplace. Well, if somebody else's thing is using TYPEROCKET, your plugin is going to stop working. So what we like to tell people is have TYPEROCKET as a dependency. Let it be a plugin that you install on its own, and then hook into TYPEROCKET using some WordPress hooks to kind of get you access to that. And then build it alongside and just require the two to work together. And that's really the best way to go about it. Anybody got other questions? Anybody trying to build something interesting that they're like, maybe TYPEROCKET could work this, but I'm not sure how? Yes?
Church directory is stored in the service somewhere. They have an API, and I haven't contacted them yet, but I was looking at some alternatives, and I kind of had this in the back of my mind as a possibility for
Right.
pulling that data and providing an interface for
Yes.
people in the church to be able to.
So one of the neat things about TYPEROCKET is, you know, that form object that we had before, that function, you can actually pass an array into that instead of a model. And so if you say, let's pull an API, you pull that API, convert that JSON data that you got into an array, throw it into the form, wire your custom fields into that form, just placing it out and naming the fields after the fields that come from that API. Hit save, have your controller send a request right back to that server. And now you created a form for a JSON API that you're now consuming and sending back. I've actually done that for MailChimp. I recreated the MailChimp system using TypeRocket, and all I did was grab a few APIs, and I could add users, update lists, move lists around. All I did was pull the API into the form system, and then like that I was able to add and manage this API inside of WordPress admin. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yes, so this is because it's a repeater field. So the repeater field gets a unique ID for every thing, and it's kind of basically a timestamp plus a UUID kind of thing, so we don't have override. And that's where that comes from. So then that will remain the same as you update things, so you don't have to worry about that changing unless you change it manually, but yeah. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. I'm here to talk. Oh, wait, actually, we had one more question. I forgot. Yes, do you have a question? You had raised your hand. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here for this talk. Like I said, I'm over here. Feel free to ask questions. I can show you all kinds of interesting, nifty things if you wanted to see it. Thank you so much.